Hello YouTube. I wasn't going to make a video about this, and I'm still not sure if it's the right thing to make a video about because I don't think it's something that really should be used to gain popularity or gain attention or gain new subscribers or anything like that. But it is something that I want to talk about. I feel like I need to talk about. Now, to anyone, I've seen a lot of people talk about the fact that, why is this getting so much attention when there were other attacks throughout the world at around the same time. There was an attack in Beirut. I think there was one in Kenya and Afghanistan. And to people who talk like that, it's perfectly natural. It's human nature to care more about tragedies that personally affect you or that you can see yourself having been a part of. Like, it's not hard for someone from the West to picture themselves having dinner at a Paris cafe. That's not a hard thing to imagine. And for me personally, I have several very close friends who live in Paris. Thank goodness they are all alive and safe. They weren't affected by this directly. And the band that was playing where there was the hostage situation and the killings, I'm a fan of that band. So if I lived in Paris, I might have been at that concert. So for me, this has really been a personal thing. And so I just want to do a sort of unscripted, just ramble about some of the issues surrounding this tragedy. The first thing, I guess, is the refugee situation. I said right from the beginning, I didn't make a video about it, but the way that Europe has handled the refugee situation has been just absolutely idiotic. Just to open the borders and let just anyone in. And if you look at images, I personally seen refugees. I happened to be in Europe during this, and I saw a border with refugees crossing, and it was almost entirely like mid-20s, mid-30s, military age men. There were very few women, children, or elderly people. It was, I don't know why anyone thinks it's a good idea to just open your borders to people you have no idea where they're from, what their background is, who they are, what they believe. And this is the risk you take. You take the risk that you're letting in terrorists, you're letting in people whose goal it is to destroy your way of life. And that's what this Paris attack was. This Paris attack, it was not an attack on a military target, it was not an attack on infrastructure, it was not an attack on an economic target. This was a direct attack on the French way of life. That's what this was. They attacked, think about it, when you think of France, what is it? Football, that's a big thing. Cafes, that's a big thing. Concerts, music, that's a big thing. This is an attack to make people afraid to live their lives. That's what this is about. And it's just sickening. It's sickening to attack that, to attack the very culture of a country. And so it's, I have to think that this will have to cause Europe to wake up and adopt some more sensible immigration policies. You have to take a pragmatic approach to safety when you're running a country. If there's a group of refugees that want to come into your country, you've got to be strict. You've got to say, okay, we have this X amount of space. We can afford to take in X amount of people, and we're only going to take in the ones that we're absolutely 100% sure are not going to be a threat to our country. And if there's any doubt, sorry, too bad, you're not allowed in. Find another place. It's not your problem as a country to solve all the world's problems. It's not, you cannot take in every refugee. Just like you cannot grieve for everyone who dies all around the world, because if you do, you'll just be paralyzed by grief. If you take in every refugee, you will be paralyzed by refugees. So if you're worried about the declining population in, let's say you're Germany, and you're worried, our population is going down because no one is breeding, then what you should do is make it super easy for skilled and educated people to move to your country from other places around the world. Like, think about all the undereducated people in North America, or is it the overeducated people in North America who are currently working at Starbucks. If they had a chance to move to Germany and maybe the German government would help them out finding an apartment and a job, a lot of them would jump on it. You know, a lot of people would love to move to Germany, but they're not allowed to come. They have to jump through 10,000 hoops to get into Germany. Yet the unskilled, undocumented person who walked from wherever the hell is allowed to just walk in and is cheered. Why? Because they're not white. Because they're an oppressed group. Because they're probably maybe from a war-torn country. As if that makes them someone that you definitely want in your country. It just doesn't make any sense at all to me. It makes sense on a humanitarian level, it makes sense on an emotional level, but you can't run a country based on emotion. That's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Now, what I don't agree with necessarily is the people using this as an excuse to stir up hatred against Muslims, because there are absolutely tons of perfectly reasonable, perfectly nice Muslims who are willing to adapt to whatever culture they find themselves in and aren't going to hold on to the fundamentalist beliefs. But at the same time, you can't pretend that Islam is just a pure religion of peace, because there's a history of using the religion for military and for the purpose of stirring up hatred. The Ottoman Empire used to routinely call a jihad on their enemy in order to stir up the populace to join up in the military and fight. It's like not most religions have a history of, you know, military conquest and all that kind of thing, but Islam's history of that is much more recent. It's not that long ago that it's, you know, even right now it's happening. So it's not, you can't just say, oh, it's a religion of peace, and, you know, you can't blame Islam for this, but at the same time, you can't blame all Muslims for this. It's a nuanced position, I know, but you can say that Islam is a problem, but you shouldn't say that all Muslims are the problem. And I know that might be a straw man, maybe most people aren't saying that, but that's the impression I'm getting. There seems to be a rise in the amount of people who are just hating on Islam itself and blaming Islam for all the world's problems right now. Of course, the main problem is ISIS itself, but ISIS is just a symptom of the larger issue. And the big question is, what do you do about ISIS? The one thing I would be strongly against is sending in an army to go fight ISIS, because an army from a Western country is probably not going to do very well against ISIS, because any individual member of ISIS knows the country, knows the language, is able to pretend to just be a regular common person at any time they want. They can just put down their gun, and then how do you tell who's a terrorist and who's not? It didn't work out very well for the Americans in Vietnam. It didn't work out for the Americans in Iraq that well. It's really hard to take on an indigenous army, especially one that they might, I don't know, they might have the support of the local people, or if there even is any local people left, I don't know. But I do know that sending in troops on the ground is probably not the way to deal with ISIS. And the other thing is, for every member of ISIS you kill, you probably create a new terrorist. You know, because they're all someone's son, someone's cousin, someone's brother. And if you kill them, then their brother might turn into the next ISIS member. You know, that's what's been happening for generations now in the Middle East. You just keep killing people, and it makes more radical people. So my personal solution is what I would suggest for dealing with ISIS. I'm not going to pretend I'm a geopolitical expert, but I would say focus on cutting off their supplies. Find out where they're getting supplies, find out where they keep their supplies, and do targeted strikes. Destroy their supplies and their infrastructure, because ISIS is an army, and if you can't, and the best way to stop an army is to cut off their support and their supplies. Use whatever economic pressures you can to stop whatever countries are supplying them, whether it's Saudi Arabia or Russia. Do whatever you can to get them to cut off their support. And maybe if you can cut off all their supplies, then the army will just collapse under its own weight. They won't be able to feed their soldiers. They won't be able to pay their soldiers, whatever it is, however they are surviving. And at the same time, you've got to worry about what happens at home. Maybe you need to tighten your border controls. Maybe you need to go through your entire population and check everyone's ID and make sure that everyone that's there is who's supposed to be there, and start kicking people out if they're not there legally. Maybe you need to change your mind about the refugee situation and kick out most of the refugees. Or maybe the ones you do keep, maybe you don't let them stay together in groups. Maybe you spread them out throughout the country and basically force them to conform to your way of life, because that's a big issue here. It's whether or not the European way of life is going to be replaced by the Middle East way of life. And I don't think anyone wants that except for maybe the people that have come from the Middle East. So there's a post that's been going around on Facebook, written by one of the survivors of the massacre at the concert. And just to, I guess, provide a little bit of perspective on this and to put the focus where it probably should be, which is on the victims, I'm going to read the statement to you. It's by Isobel Bowdery. I don't know anything about this person. This is the first I've ever heard of them, but I'll read what they had to say. You never think it will happen to you. It was just a Friday night at a rock show. The atmosphere was so happy, and everyone was dancing and smiling. And then, when the men came through the front entrance and began the shooting, we naively believed it was all part of the show. It wasn't just a terrorist attack. It was a massacre. Dozens of people were shot right in front of me. Pools of blood filled the floor. Cries of grown men who held their girlfriends' dead bodies pierced the small music venue. Futures demolished. Friends heartbroken. In an instant, shocked and alone, I pretended to be dead for over an hour, lying among people who could see their loved ones motionless. Holding my breath, I tried not to move, not cry, not giving those men the fear they longed to see. I was incredibly lucky to survive, but so many didn't. The people who had been there for the exact same reasons as I, to have a fun Friday night, were innocent. This world is cruel, and acts like this are supposed to highlight the depravity of humans, and the images of those men circling us like vultures will haunt me for the rest of my life. The way they meticulously aimed and shot people around the standing area I was in the center of, without any consideration for human life, it didn't feel real. I expected any moment for someone to say it was just a nightmare. But being a survivor of this horror lets me be able to shed light on the heroes. To the man who reassured me and put his life on the line to try and cover my brain while I whimpered. To the couple whose last words of love kept me believing the good in the world. To the police who succeeded in rescuing hundreds of people. To the complete strangers who picked me up from the road and consoled me during the 45 minutes I truly believed the boy I loved was dead. To the injured man who I had mistaken for him, and then, on my recognition that he was not Amaury, held me and told me everything was going to be fine, despite being all alone and scared himself. To the woman who opened her doors to the survivors. To the friend who offered me shelter and who went out to buy new clothes so I wouldn't have to wear this blood-stained top. To all of you who have sent caring messages of support. You make me believe this world has the potential to be better. To never let this happen again. But most of this is to the 80 people who were murdered inside that venue, who weren't as lucky, who didn't get to wake up today, and to all the pain that their friends and families are going through. I am so sorry. There's nothing that will fix the pain. I feel privileged to be there for their last breaths. And truly believing that I would join them, I promise that their last thoughts were not on the animals who caused this. It was thinking of the people they loved. As I lay down in the blood of strangers and waiting for my bullet to end my mere 22 years, I envisioned every face that I've ever loved and whispered, "I love you," over and over again. Reflecting on the highlights of my life, wishing that they knew that no matter what happened to me, to keep believing in the good in people, to not let those men win. Last night the lives of many were forever changed, and it is up to us to be better people, to live lives that the innocent victims of this tragedy dreamt about, but sadly will now never be able to fulfill. Rest in peace, angels. You will never be forgotten.